Welcome everybody back to the Friar Talk podcast and YouTube channel. For today's episode is just going to be me and Ryan. Isaac wasn't able to come with us today. Chase's laptop overheated, so just going to be us two today. But we're going to be doing a little second half preview for the Padres. I'm going to be talking about whether or not this team should make the playoffs, whether or not they're going to. Just going to get into that a little bit later on in the episode. But Ryan, I guess the first thing to kind of start off is one, how do you see this team right now? How do you expect to see them after the deadline? And what are your expectations for this team?
I think they've overperformed so far. I mean, I don't want to mince words. I don't want to sugarcoat anything. Looking at this team on paper, yeah, the starting pitching's been pretty great. Musgrove and Darvish have been good. Clevenger's been good at times. Gore's been amazing at times. Nick Martinez has showed up. But ultimately, the bullpen and the lineup have just not been up to par with other contending teams. Outside of Machado, it's kind of a really bleak look for the rest of the lineup. You've had some decent performers like, Profar, Cronenworth to an extent. Luke Voigt's hit for a little bit of power, even though he hasn't really been good. In the bullpen, it's just kind of been a disaster, to be honest. Outside of Nabil Charismat and Nick Martinez really hitting a stride out in the bullpen, Taylor Rogers and Luis Garcia have just not really gotten the job done. So as of right now, yeah, we have a very good record, but on paper, there's a lot of holes in this team that are going to need to be addressed by the deadline, or else I could easily see this team falling apart just like it has past couple years.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with you in your statement that this team has overperformed in the first half. Now, I think it's a really positive thing because going into this year, I thought, okay, you're probably going to try to fight to be around 500 without Tatis because you brought up a lot of the holes. The holes have been there the majority of the season. Now, there's been times when the bullpen has been better at some points and times when it's been worse. Obviously, they've had a lot of injuries there. Had a couple injuries to the lineup, but I never expected the lineup to be great, so it's not that much of a surprise that they lack in slugging so much. But looking at this team right now, you're 10 games over 500. That is phenomenal with what they've been throwing out of the bullpen and also on like offensively. A couple days before the All-Star break, your lineup was so bad. It was horrible. You didn't have Profar, you don't have Myers. Like so many guys are gone. You have Grisham struggling, Nola struggling, and it looked really bad for a couple of those games there. You're already going to see a good upgrade in the outfield because you now have Profar and Myers there. Mazar has been solid. Now, I'm not a super big Grisham truther, but like you already are getting a little bit of that. The big thing is going to be who comes back for this team, who's healthy, and can they add an impact bat or two? Obviously, Juan Soto's been talked about a ton, but Josh Bell is also could be a tremendous addition to this team. I've talked about Ian Happ a lot. Like there's a lot of guys that you could add. Big question is, are they going to? Who's coming back from injury? Because if you look at the bullpen, let's say we get a healthy Pierce Johnson, healthy Drew Pomerantz, your bullpen's looking pretty damn good. Like all of a sudden it looks really good. Just those two guys, maybe Castillo too. But how confident are we that they're actually going to come back? I'm not very confident in Drew Pomerantz to come back healthy. Even if he comes back, when he came back last year, wasn't the same guy. Similar concerns with Pierce Johnson. It's just kind of tough to tell. So a lot of those areas are like, who are you going to get? Who's healthy? How healthy are they? So the bullpen's kind of in flux. You could also go a safer route and you could add an arm or two to the bullpen during the trade deadline. That would shore up a lot of those questions. So for me, it's tough for like where this team is at right now. I think first half, I think it was a pretty big success. Yeah, they sucked in the last 6 weeks. I thought they were going to have a couple more stretches like that throughout that first half. So the fact that Tatis has not been back, the fact that they've already gone through some injuries when I thought there were some holes to begin with, and they're 10 games over 500 is a huge plus. Do I think this team should make the playoffs? Yes, but that's kind of with an asterisk for me because I'm looking at I'm going, I think they're going to add pieces. I think guys are going to come back. I think Tatis is going to come back. I think he's going to be a massive addition. I think they're going to add, even if it's only one guy, Josh Bell. And I think just adding Josh Bell will make such a difference. So I think having Esteury Ruiz, having CJ Abrams on this roster, especially if you don't trade Juan Soto, and they're kind of going through, we've already seen CJ kind of go through a lot of his growing pains early on. Month or two, I think he's going to be playing a lot better. And we've seen that with almost all prospects when they come up. Like the first little while, look at Julio Rodriguez. He sucked in his first like 30 games. He was bad. He's like in the All-Star game, that's the only guy they're talking about. So I do think that a lot of people have been a little bit impatient with those guys, but I definitely like where the Padres are at. I don't like where they're at financially if they're trying to stay in the luxury tax because there's like no money to be made. But I don't know. I'm still pretty optimistic on this team. I think that likely they get the second or third wild card. That's kind of my prediction for them. But you think I'm being too biased in my fandom there, Ryan?
Well, let me just say what I think needs to happen with this team. Number one, you cannot be over reliant on Fernando coming back and immediately turning the ship around by himself. Honestly, if Fernando came back and performed half as well as he has in the past, I would consider that a success. Due to he hasn't been even swinging a bat for months and months, and the rest of the league's been dialed in, playing competitive games, and he's got to come back and play catch up. Like, I'm not really expecting, prime Fernando Tatis Jr. slugging over 600 like he has in the past. I'm not expecting him to be the guy to come back and turn the offense around. So, I mean, first things first, when you look at the lineup, two things you have to consider. Number one, it's really time to start committing to who deserves certain spots. Is anyone really going to look at me and say that Trent Grisham deserves to play over Esteury Ruiz? No. I mean, they can try, but they're not going to be right. And honestly, when Will Myers comes back, the first thing I want to do is go make an ass print on the bench and let Nomar Mazara play right field, because as far as I'm concerned, Will Myers hasn't shown me anything since 2020 that makes me think he can out-hit Nomar Mazara, and his defense isn't necessarily better than his in right field, so I don't really know why he would be playing over him. That's just my opinion. We paid him $83 million, and that doesn't make me want to give him a spot in the outfield over someone who's actually hitting right now.
So can I add one thing right there?
Go for it.
Do you like the Mazara Myers platoon? I love it. I think Mazara hits righties, Myers hits lefties. If you look at their OPS, because Myers is a below average hitter against right-handers, but he's like 110. I think he's like 108 or 110 OPS plus throughout his career against lefties. Like, he's good against lefties, and Mazara is horrible.
If that becomes a trend, then yeah, I'd be totally fine with a platoon out there. But Will Myers has not shown me anything to deserve him being the starting right fielder full time. I think Mazara should, at the very least, get every start against right-handed pitching, because all it takes is somebody with an okay slider and the ability to miss outside in the dirt with it, and Will Myers is immediately going to swing at that pitch. So, I'm all in on Nomar getting the majority of at-bats out there. The other thing is, at the deadline, you have to go all in on power hitting, because that has been our biggest deficiency since the beginning of the year. No one in our lineup can consistently hit for power. It's a huge issue, and there's plenty of guys out there that are available. And honestly, if you want to go win the World Series this year, don't think about staying under the luxury tax. It's too much of an unnecessary roadblock. If you're not willing to go over the luxury tax, you're not willing to do what it takes to win the World Series this year. You have to understand that this roster cannot sustain this level of success unless you supplement it. And in order to supplement it, you have to commit to spending money at the deadline. That's all I got to say about that.
All right.
Wait, one more thing I forgot. Same thing goes for the bullpen. Do Luis Garcia and Taylor Rogers really deserve more high leverage innings over Nabil Krismat? Maybe Nick Martinez deserves more shots and opportunities in those spots. Maybe Adrian Morejon, who's even though his ERA is kind of up there, he's looked fantastic. I hate the idea of you need to have a closer and eighth inning guy. And you have to commit to those guys for the rest of the year. If a guy loses a spot, he loses his spot. I don't understand why Nabil Krismat has not at least taken the eighth inning spot from Luis Garcia. He hasn't had a clean inning since he had that one outing against the Phillies, where he actually looked good. Everything else, he's at least allowed one base runner, can't locate any of his pitches. He's got great stuff, but no location. And I don't understand why he's still in the eighth inning when we have guys that are out pitching him in the bullpen.
Yeah, and I think that's going to kind of come down to a lot of how this team performs. Just like mean, you bring up him. Another guy that always gets brought up, we haven't even said his name yet, but Hosmer. We've seen that he's been in the lineup less. So I do kind of wonder what they do when guys come back. I think I don't know what you think, but I think if Pierce Johnson comes back and he's like pitching how he should, like he's fine, which is a big if. But I think that he would likely be like a guy in contention for that 8th inning spot. But I also agree with you. I don't think you have to have set spots in your bullpen. They kind of when they had Pomeranz, when he was looking really good before, when they would kind of move him around into different areas where it was like, all right, man, you're going to come in, you're going to be in the 8th inning tonight because that's when the heart of the lineup's coming up. Oh, you're going in the 7th because someone's in a jam. Like that kind of stuff with him worked really well. So I think you should do that. I'm hoping to see more and more Hone as well. That's a big deal. But you brought up the power. Padres are 25th in home runs. You also brought up the luxury tax. We talked about the Myers-Mazzara split a little bit. I don't think they have to go into the luxury tax. And I'm not don't get me wrong. It helps a team if you go into luxury tax. But I think that if you are not going into the luxury tax with the idea that you're going to spend a lot next year, I am perfectly fine with them not trying to get into the luxury tax. Now, I still think you can improve this team quite a bit with doing small moves. I said Josh Bell, he's owed $10 million this year. Ian Happ, he's owed $7 million. Laureano, he's owed $2 million. There's a lot of guys that don't make that much, and Will Myers makes a lot of money. I think you're going to have to see the Padres likely, and I know we're talking about a lot of trade stuff, but I think they are likely to move Myers. I really do. And I know that gets brought up every year, but I don't think Hosmer is tradable. And I think that Myers is ultimately that guy. So I think you can do it without going to luxury tax. I will be really bummed out if the Padres just kind of sit on their hands at the deadline. That would be really unfortunate because there's a couple ways that they can slightly upgrade this team and immediately be way better. The pitching is phenomenal in terms of the starters. And they haven't all been working at like where they're normally at. Clev has slowly started to come back. Mackenzie Gore kind of got burnt out. They haven't even all been clicking at the same time. If they're all clicking in October, you can piggyback 3 of the guys, and the bullpen's not going to be as big of a difference in the playoffs. And that would be huge if that was the case. So I don't know. I still have a lot of faith in this team. I know that the last slump kind of bummed a lot of people out, but if they do things right at the deadline, I think they have a good shot. Now, final thing we'll talk about is looking ahead into the schedule a little bit, just kind of where you see this team's ups and downs. And I think this is going to kind of open a lot of eyes because you're going to see, oh, wow, there's a part of the schedule that if they slump at, they're going to be in a rough spot. So looking at the schedule, Mets, Tigers on the road. Then we got the Twins, 5-game series against the Rockies, Dodgers, Giants, Nationals, Marlins, Nationals, Cleveland. That's a spot that you need to capitalize in. Royals. And then you get into the last month of the season, basically. Giants, Dodgers, Diamondbacks, Dodgers, Mariners, Diamondbacks, Cardinals, Rockies, Dodgers, White Sox, Giants. They play the Giants so much. If the Giants are going to jump the Padres, it's going to be that they're going to beat them in that last 6-week stretch of the season. So I'm looking at this team, and a lot of it is you got to get right by September. Once September hits, this team has to be clicking on all cylinders. And if they do that, I do think they'll make the playoffs. But that's a tough thing to ask, and especially that you're already kind of thin with injuries right now. If you start adding on to that, all of a sudden this team looks really in a really, really tough spot. So I don't know, Ryan, anything else you want to add before kind of talking about where this team's going to at, like where you kind of project them to be?
I don't really have anything to add. The only thing I want to say is there are no more terrifying words in the English language strung together than 5-game series against the Rockies. May God have mercy on us all.
Dude, good. Okay, good thing that it's not in Colorado. Because we were talking about this before we got on, but if this was in Colorado, you're seeing
if this was in Colorado, it would be the equivalent of playing Russian roulette and praying to God that the 6th chamber with the bullet is that 6th game you don't get to play. Good Lord.
Yeah, that'd be bad. All right, guys. I think that's probably it for today. Me and Ryan are going to have another video out tomorrow on the draft recap, which is a very fun draft. The Padres did well. So we're going to be talking about that. We did bring that up a while back. Been on a break for a little bit, but got some stuff in the works. Also, I am going to the whole Mets series starting today, so hopefully we do not start out this second half slow. Maybe that's why I'm a little bit more positive than Ryan on the Padres outlook, but I think that's probably going to do it for today's episode. So thank you guys for listening, and we will talk to you guys very